Good evening and welcome. Tonight's stories take us onto dark highways where hitchhikers appear and sometimes never leave. Disturbing, unforgettable, and maybe too real. Before we begin, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. And if you enjoy these nightly chills, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like. A new horror tale arrives here every single day. I'm not a cop or some kind of ghost hunter. I'm just a delivery driver. I run routes for a small furniture company in southern Ohio, and most nights I drive the back roads home because it's faster than sticking to the highway. I never thought anything about that job would be worth telling a story about. Until the night I picked up the girl on Route 19. It was close to midnight, and I'd just finished unloading a dresser at the far end of town. The sky was low and heavy, the kind of overcast that blocks even the moonlight. Route 19 was empty, just the faint buzz of my old Chevy's tires against the cracked asphalt. I was already thinking about the leftover pizza waiting for me at home when I saw her. At first, she looked like nothing more than a pale blur at the edge of my headlights. I slowed down, thinking maybe it was a deer. But then the blur straightened into a shape. A girl, young, maybe 17, barefoot, and wearing a white dress that looked torn at the hem. Her arms were wrapped around herself, shivering, like she'd been standing there for hours. I don't make a habit of stopping for hitchhikers. Too many stories about carjackings or worse. But this wasn't some grizzled drifter with a backpack. She looked fragile, lost. The kind of person who needed help, not suspicion. Against my better judgment, I pulled onto the shoulder and rolled down the window. "You okay?" I called out. My voice sounded too loud in the silence. She turned her head slowly, like her neck was stiff. Her eyes caught the headlights, wide, glassy, too big for her face. I expected her to wave me off, maybe mumble something, but instead, she just stepped closer. "Can I get a ride?" Her voice was so faint I almost missed it. Something in me hesitated. Her bare feet were dirty, scraped. Her dress was damp like she'd been standing in the rain, except it hadn't rained in days. I told myself maybe she'd run away from a bad home. Maybe she'd been walking for miles. "Yeah," I said finally, leaning over to unlock the door. "Hop in." She didn't move fast, just glided around the truck and climbed in, folding her hands neatly in her lap. I noticed she didn't smell like sweat, or dirt, or anything at all. She didn't smell like anything. I tried to keep things normal. "Where are you headed?" "Just down the road," she whispered. Her voice was clearer this time, but it had a strange flatness to it, like she was repeating lines she'd memorized. I pulled back onto the road, my headlights catching nothing but trees and darkness. She stared out the windshield, blinking rarely, her pale hair falling in thin strands around her face. I couldn't shake the feeling that something about her was wrong. Not dangerous, exactly, but off. "You got family waiting?" I asked, trying again. She tilted her head, slowly, as if she'd never been asked the question before. Then she gave the faintest smile. "No, they're not waiting." I gripped the wheel tighter. The air in the cab felt colder than outside, like I'd cranked the AC without realizing. I stole a glance at her bare feet, clean now, not a speck of dirt on them, but I knew they'd been filthy when I picked her up. I swallowed hard. Maybe I was tired, seeing things. I'd been working long hours. That had to be it. We drove in silence for a few more minutes, until she finally lifted one hand and pointed ahead. "There," she said. I followed her finger to an old gravel turnout I'd passed 100 times before. It led to nothing but an abandoned farmhouse, falling in on itself. I slowed, my tires crunching on the stones, but my gut screamed at me not to stop. Then I glanced at the passenger seat, and the girl was gone. The seatbelt still lay across the cushion, buckled tight, like someone was still wearing it. And from the back seat, right behind my ear, a soft voice whispered, "Thank you for stopping." I don't think there are words for how fast my stomach dropped when I heard that whisper. It was right in my ear, like someone had leaned forward to speak low and close, the way you'd do if you didn't want anyone else to hear. But there was no one else in the cab. No one should have been there at all. I froze. My eyes locked on the road ahead, because some part of me was convinced that if I didn't look, if I just kept driving, the illusion would break and I'd realize I'd imagined it. The cab was dead quiet again. My breathing sounded too loud, harsh in the cold air. Slowly, I turned my head. The passenger seat was still empty. The seatbelt still buckled, slack across the cushion like it was stretched over invisible legs. My pulse hammered against my throat. "Who's back there?" I said. My voice cracked, embarrassingly small. Nothing. I flicked my eyes to the rearview mirror. At first, all I saw was the usual dark shape of the back seat. Then, as my headlights swung across another curve in Route 19, I caught a glimpse. Pale skin, hair hanging forward, the tilt of a head. Someone sitting perfectly still, staring down at their hands. I swerved, overcorrected, nearly put the truck into a ditch. My hands shook on the wheel. I snapped my eyes back up, and when I looked again, the back seat was empty. I told myself I was hallucinating. That had to be it. Too many hours on the road, too much caffeine. I even said it out loud, like saying it would make it true. I'm just tired, that's all. But the temperature kept dropping. My breath fogged faintly in the cab, even though the heater knob was turned all the way up. And the longer I drove, the more I noticed the smell. Not rot, not dirt, not even mildew. Just absence. A sterile, empty smell, like cold metal, like nothing alive had been in the truck for 100 years. Every nerve in me screamed to pull over, to get out and run, but I couldn't. The thought of stopping in the dark, surrounded by woods, with her somewhere behind me or inside me, was worse. So I just drove, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles went white. After what felt like forever, I saw the faint glow of a roadside diner up ahead. I'd stopped there a few times before on late runs. It wasn't much, a flickering neon sign, gravel lot, and greasy food, but at that moment it felt like salvation. I yanked the wheel, skidding slightly as I pulled into the lot. The diner's lot lights buzzed overhead, throwing sharp shadows across the truck. For the first time since I'd picked her up, I felt like I could breathe. I killed the engine, sat for a second, and forced myself to look in the mirror. Empty. Just me. I almost laughed. My hands trembled against the steering wheel, sweat dampening the leather. Maybe I had imagined it. Maybe this was just exhaustion and paranoia. I shoved the door open, desperate for the warm, greasy stink of diner coffee. But as soon as my boots hit gravel, I heard it again. That voice. Right behind me this time, clear as day, low and polite. "You said you'd take me home." I spun around so fast I nearly lost my balance. The lot was empty, not a single soul near the truck, not even in the shadows. My breath hitched. I backed toward the diner door, yanking it open like a drowning man breaking the surface. The warmth and chatter inside nearly undid me. A waitress glanced up from behind the counter, mid-conversation with a trucker. Her smile faltered when she saw me. "You all right, honey?" she asked. I opened my mouth to say something. Anything. But in the glass window of the diner door, I caught the reflection of my truck outside. And in that reflection, clear as day, someone was sitting in the passenger seat again, head tilted, staring straight at me. I couldn't eat, couldn't drink. I just sat there in the diner booth, staring at my reflection in the window, watching the truck outside. Every time the lot light flickered, I swore I saw movement in the cab, like someone was shifting in the passenger seat, waiting. The waitress must have thought I was strung out. She refilled my coffee 3 times, and I never touched it. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. Eventually, I forced myself to breathe, to think. I told myself I just needed to rest a little, get my nerves under control. But there was no chance of sleep. not with the truck sitting there. Finally, around 2 a.m., I decided to face it. Just get in, drive home, and be done with it. She couldn't really be there. She couldn't. The night air hit me like ice when I stepped outside. The lot was quiet except for the buzzing lights. My boots crunched on gravel, each step heavier than the last. I half expected the truck door to open on its own. It didn't. It just sat there, hulking and ordinary. I opened the door, slid in, and shut it fast, like I was keeping something out. The cab smelled the same, cold, empty, metallic. I gripped the wheel, staring at the empty passenger seat. Empty. Okay, I whispered to myself. It's fine. Just drive. The engine rumbled awake. I pulled onto Route 19, the diner lights shrinking in the rear view until the dark swallowed them whole. My chest loosened slightly with each mile I put between me and that turnout, that farmhouse, that whisper. But then I heard it, the soft click of the seatbelt sliding into place. My blood turned to ice. I snapped my head sideways. The seat was buckled again, and this time the belt wasn't slack. It was stretched taut, like someone invisible was strapped in beside me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. My foot pressed the accelerator hard, the truck whining as it picked up speed. The trees on either side blurred into black streaks. "Get out!" I shouted, voice cracking. "Get the hell out of my truck!" The belt stayed buckled. The air grew so cold I could see my breath streaming like smoke in the headlights. I tried everything, swerved, braked, even flung the door open at one point while still moving, as if momentum itself would throw her out. But every time I looked back, the belt was still locked across the seat, tighter, like she was settling in for the ride. Then came the voice, low and steady, right at my ear again. "You're taking me home." I nearly drove off the road. My hands slicked the wheel with sweat. I didn't know what else to do, so I just drove, mile after mile, until the road bled into back roads I didn't recognize. No matter how many turns I made, the signs never changed. Everyone read Route 19. It's been hours, maybe days. The fuel gauge hasn't moved. The trees never end. My phone won't turn on. I don't think I ever left that turnout. She hasn't spoken again. But I know she's there. The belt stays buckled. Sometimes, in the reflection of the window, I see her head tilted toward me, hair hanging down, eyes wide and unblinking. I don't know what she is, or what she wants. All I know is Route 19 goes on forever, and I'm still driving. And if you're ever out here late at night, if you see a beat-up Chevy with a driver who looks half dead gripping the wheel, don't wave me down. Don't try to help. Because she'll be waiting in the passenger seat, smiling, ready for another ride. I've been driving for a living most of my adult life. Not trucks, not cabs, sales. The kind where you live on the road, shaking hands with strangers, staying in motels that all smell like old carpet and air freshener. If you want to know why a man like me would ever pick up a hitchhiker, it's simple. Long roads get lonely, and sometimes the silence is worse than the risk. That's what I told myself the night I met him. It was outside a gas station in rural Indiana. I'd stopped for a fill-up, stretching my legs, watching the moths slap against the buzzing fluorescent light overhead. That's when I saw him, young guy, maybe mid-20s, wearing a dark hoodie and jeans, hands jammed in his pockets. He wasn't holding a bag. Just standing there, still as stone, staring at the cracked asphalt like it held all the answers. When I came back out after paying, he spoke. Quiet, almost too soft to hear. Heading east? I should have said no. My mom always told me stories about killers hitching rides, about trusting your gut. But he looked harmless, rail-thin, pale in a way that made me think of long hospital stays. And something about the way he asked, like he already knew I'd agree, pushed me to nod. Yeah, hop in. He slid into the passenger seat without another word. The door thunked shut, heavier than it should have. I waited for him to buckle his belt. He didn't. just folded his hands in his lap, eyes fixed straight ahead. We pulled out onto the highway. The road stretched black and endless under the high beams. I figured he'd loosen up after a while, maybe share where he was headed, what his story was. But 10 minutes passed, then 20. He didn't say a thing. Quiet type, huh? I tried, with a chuckle that fell flat. Nothing. You from around here? Not even a glance. He sat so still, I started to wonder if he'd fallen asleep with his eyes open. His face was blank, but his breathing was too shallow for sleep. The silence grew heavy. I turned on the radio, some late-night talk show crackling through static. A second later, the station cut out entirely, just white noise hissing through the speakers. I smacked the dial. Nothing. Guess reception's crap out here, I muttered. That's when I noticed the temperature. The heater was humming, same as always, but my fingers were going numb on the wheel. The air felt like the inside of a freezer. I glanced sideways and my gut clenched. His breath wasn't fogging. Mine was, puffing out in thin clouds, but his chest barely moved, and no condensation, no fog. Nothing. I gripped the wheel harder, heart thumping. Rational thoughts fired off one after another. He's sick, maybe low blood pressure, maybe he's just weird, maybe I'm overreacting. I almost convinced myself. Then he turned his head, slowly, creaking like it hurt him, until he was staring straight at me. I nearly jumped out of my skin. His eyes, too wide, too dark, didn't blink. He didn't smile, didn't frown, just stared. You all right, buddy? I asked, voice cracking. He didn't answer, just kept looking until my knuckles went white on the wheel. Then, after what felt like forever, he faced forward again. Silence. I swallowed hard, trying to laugh at myself. Creeps come in all shapes, I thought. You wanted company, you got it. Be careful what you wish for. The road unspooled ahead, nothing but empty fields and patches of woods. I checked the clock. Half an hour had passed. Then I checked the fuel gauge. My stomach dropped. The needle hadn't moved. I'd driven 30 miles, and the tank was still as full as when I left the station. That's when I realized this ride wasn't going to end. The gas gauge shouldn't have bothered me as much as it did. Maybe it was broken. Trucks get quirks, dials stick, fuses blow. But in that moment, watching that needle sit stubbornly on full, I felt the back of my neck crawl with a kind of dread I couldn't reason away. I glanced at him again. He hadn't moved, still staring ahead, hands folded, posture perfect, like he was waiting for something. My mouth went dry. I cleared my throat. You know, man, you could at least tell me where you're headed. Nothing. I tried again, louder this time. Hey, you got ears? You gonna sit there all night or what? His head turned. Same as before, slow, grinding, unnatural. He faced me, eyes unblinking, black as the unlit fields rushing past. For a second, I thought I saw something move inside them. Not a reflection, something behind them. Like watching fish glide through deep water. I slammed my foot on the brakes. The truck lurched, tires squealing, headlights swinging across barren fields. My seatbelt locked tight across my chest. But him? He didn't move an inch, not a flinch, just sat there, watching me like he was nailed into place. The truck shuddered to a stop on the shoulder. My breath came fast, white fog filling the cab. My hand fumbled for the door handle, slick with sweat. I was ready to bolt into the night, even if it meant freezing out there. Don't, he whispered. It was the first sound he'd made since asking for a ride. His voice was wrong, thin, papery, as though someone far away was speaking through him. The sound wrapped around me, sticky, impossible to ignore. I froze. My hand was still on the door handle, but I couldn't make my fingers pull. You'll never get there, he said. The road doesn't let you off. I wanted to scream at him, shove him out, anything. But something about the way he spoke, so calm and final, made me feel like I was the intruder. Like I was in his car, not the other way around. My heart hammered as I forced my hand to move. I shoved the door open, stumbling out into the cold night. The air hit me like knives. The fields stretched forever on both sides, black and empty. No houses, no lights, no sound. Just wind. I staggered a few feet from the truck, chest heaving. I told myself if I just started walking, I'd find something. A house, another road, anything. Then the headlights flicked. I spun. The truck idled steady, exhaust curling white against the dark. The passenger door swung open with a slow groan, though no one touched it. The seat belt hung loose now, swaying. I stepped back. My boots sank into the frozen soil at the roadside. "Get back in." The voice wasn't whispered this time. It carried, echoing across the empty fields, though the figure in the truck hadn't moved. His shape sat there, framed by the glow of the dash, head turned toward me, eyes two black wells that swallowed the light. I shook my head, muttering to myself, "No. No way. Not a chance." The truck's engine roared. The headlights flared bright, blinding. I threw my hands up, stumbling back further, only to feel metal slam against my spine. Another truck. Mine. Same dents, same rust, idling behind me on the shoulder. Two of them side by side, engines rumbling in perfect sync. And through both windshields, the same man sat in the passenger seat, staring at me. I backed away from the two trucks, heart battering against my ribs so hard it hurt. The exhaust poured in twin streams, thick and white, curling like smoke over the road. Both engines growled, perfectly synchronized, though neither of my keys were in the ignition anymore. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, but it didn't change. Two trucks. Both mine, both real, both with him in the passenger seat. "What do you want from me?" I shouted. My voice cracked and tore out of my throat like it had been scraped raw. The figure in the first truck didn't move. The one in the second leaned forward slightly, enough for me to see his mouth open. "You agreed to the ride," he said. It was the same papery voice, but louder now. Certain. "I didn't agree to this," I snapped. My breath poured white into the night. My hands shook so bad I could barely keep them raised. The figure in the second truck tilted his head, like a curious child. "You didn't think the road was yours, did you?" The ground swayed under me, nausea clawing at my stomach. I turned to run. Didn't matter where, just away, but the field behind me stretched on like a black ocean. No landmarks, no fences, just wind and dark and cold that went on forever. The gravel crunched behind me. I spun, expecting footsteps, but it was the trucks. They'd moved. Both had rolled forward, engines idling steady, keeping pace with me as though pulled by invisible strings. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." I ran. I don't know how far. My lungs burned, throat raw from sucking in frozen air. But every time I looked back, those headlights were behind me, sliding slow, steady, patient. Eventually, my legs gave out. I collapsed on the road, palms scraping the cracked asphalt. The headlights washed over me, flooding my shadow long and sharp across the ground. The first truck eased to a stop in front of me. The second stopped just behind. I was trapped. The passenger door clicked open. The figure stepped out, one deliberate movement at a time. But it wasn't the way a man should move. It was too clean, too rehearsed, like someone had studied human motion and was now performing it by memory. He stood over me, face shadowed by the glow of the headlights. Then he crouched down, and I finally saw his eyes up close. They weren't dark. They were mirrors, perfect silver mirrors that reflected my own terrified face back at me. "This was never about me," he said. His voice was clearer now, deeper, echoing inside my skull instead of my ears. "You were the passenger." The words punched the air out of me. I shook my head, stammering, "What? No, I was driving. He pressed a cold hand to my chest. My body seized, breath freezing in my lungs. The night around me seemed to peel away, folding like paper, the road collapsing into nothingness. And then I was inside, back in the truck. Not the driver's seat this time, the passenger's. The wheel turned on its own. The engine growled without me touching it. My hands lay useless in my lap. My figure, sat in the driver's seat now. He looked just like me. Same jacket, same face, same trembling hands gripping the wheel. I tried to scream, to move, but nothing came out. My throat was locked, my body unresponsive. I could only watch as I drove into the endless black road. The last thing I remember before the dark swallowed everything was the faint echo of his voice, calm and final. You were never going east. You were never going anywhere at all. I was a sophomore at a small college in Kentucky back when this happened. I didn't own a car, but one weekend I borrowed my roommate's beat-up Civic to drive home and surprise my folks. It was supposed to be a 3-hour trip, mostly open highway, nothing special. I thought the hardest part of that night would be keeping myself awake with gas station coffee. Instead, I ended up picking up a preacher on the side of the road. It was late, maybe 11 p.m., and the stretch of highway I was on had no lights, just my headlights cutting through black fields and the occasional broken billboard. That's when I saw him, a tall man in a long black coat, standing dead still at the edge of the shoulder, arm raised, thumb out. His other hand clutched a small leather-bound Bible. I don't know why I slowed down. Everything in me said, don't do it. Hitchhikers weren't safe, and my mom had warned me a dozen times not to be stupid. But something about the way he stood there, straight-backed, composed, like he wasn't afraid of anything out here, made me feel like he belonged, like maybe I was the one out of place. I pulled over. He opened the door without a word, slid in, and nodded once in thanks. His coat smelled faintly of smoke and something older, like damp stone. "Where you headed?" I asked, forcing casual small talk. He looked at me with sharp gray eyes, the kind that seemed to see straight through you. His face was pale, lined, but not wrinkled, like a mask carved from candle wax. "Just down the road," he said. His voice was smooth, deep, the kind that belonged in a pulpit. I nodded, pulled back onto the highway. For a few minutes we rode in silence. His presence filled the small car in a way that made the air feel heavy. I kept sneaking glances. The Bible never left his hands. His lips moved faintly, like he was whispering words only he could hear. Finally, he spoke. "Do you believe in God?" I laughed nervously. I guess so. I was raised in church. Haven't really thought about it much lately." His lips curved in a small smile. "The road tests us all." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded and kept driving. The radio had cut out earlier, no stations this far from town, so all I heard was the hum of the tires and his soft voice when he whispered again. At first, I thought he was praying, but then I caught pieces of it. Words I didn't recognize. Sharp syllables that didn't sound like English or any language I'd ever heard in a church. My knuckles tightened on the wheel. "Sorry, what was that?" He stopped whispering and smiled again. "Just scripture." Something in me wanted to believe him, but my stomach nodded. Those words weren't from any Bible I'd ever read. I focused on the road, trying to shake it off. Probably just nerves, right? Long drive, creepy company, imagination filling in the blanks. But then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The mile markers. I'd been driving for nearly 20 minutes since I picked him up, and the same marker kept showing up. Mile 66. First once, then again, then again. Each time we passed, his lips twitched, and his whispering grew a little louder. I slammed the brakes, tires squealing as the Civic fishtailed slightly on the empty asphalt. My chest heaved, panic bubbling out of me. "What the hell's going on?" I snapped. The preacher turned his head toward me, calm as ever. His gray eyes glowed faintly in the dashlight, and in his hand the Bible had opened on its own. The pages flipped wildly, though the windows were shut tight. When they stopped, every page was blank. That's when he said, low and certain, "This is where the sermon begins." The car felt smaller with him inside, like the walls had crept inward. His blank Bible lay open across his lap, pages glowing faintly in the dashlight. He didn't look at me, didn't look at the road. His gray eyes were fixed on the empty fields outside, but his lips moved steadily, reciting words I couldn't understand. I gripped the wheel, sweat sliding down the back of my neck. My gut screamed at me to pull over and kick him out, but my body wouldn't listen. The Civic hummed forward like it was driving itself. "Listen," I said, voice cracking. "I don't know what kind of joke this is, but I'm not part of it. You need to get out." The preacher smiled faintly, still whispering. The sound grew sharper, scraping at my ears like glass. I cranked the volume dial on the radio, desperate for noise to drown it out, but the speakers only spat static, and then, beneath it, I heard the same words echoing back. His voice doubled, tripled, filling every inch of the car until I couldn't tell if it was coming from him, the speakers, or inside my own skull. I slammed my fist on the dashboard. "Stop it!" He stopped mid-word. For the first time, he turned fully toward me. His eyes glowed brighter now, steady beams of silver light. "Do you know why you're on this road?" he asked. I shook my head, breath ragged. "I'm just going home." "You are," he said softly. "But not the way you thought." My hands trembled so bad I could hardly steer. I veered onto the shoulder, gravel spitting under the tires, and braked hard. The car shuddered to a stop. "Out," I said. My voice came out barely above a whisper. "Get out of my car." He didn't move. Instead, the Bible's pages flipped again, faster this time, whipping as if a storm tore through the cabin. My hair whipped across my face. The overhead light flicked on by itself, then off, then on again, strobing the preacher's face in a way that made him look less and less human. His skin stretched too tight across his cheekbones. His mouth opened wider than it should. "I said get out!" I screamed. He closed the Bible with a snap. Just like that, the wind died. Silence fell heavy in the cab. "You can't end a sermon halfway," he murmured. I couldn't take it anymore. I threw the car in park, lunged for the door handle, and shoved it open. The night air hit me like a wave, damp and cold. I stumbled out onto the shoulder, sucking in breath, every instinct telling me to run, but when I looked back, my blood froze. The car door was still shut. The dome light glowed faintly inside, and there I was, sitting in the driver's seat. Me. I blinked, heart pounding. The reflection me gripped the wheel tight, eyes wide with panic, lips moving silently. And beside him, the preacher leaned close, whispering into his ear. I staggered backward, bile rising in my throat. The real car sat silent and still in front of me, but I could see myself inside it, trapped, replaying the same scene I had just lived. I turned to run down the highway, but the mile marker caught my eye again. Mile 66. The same crooked signpost, bent at the corner, shining faintly in my headlights. I had never left it. The preacher's voice followed me, though I didn't look back. It was louder now, booming across the dark fields. Words that rattled in my bones without meaning. And then, carried on the night air, he spoke a line I understood perfectly. "The altar is ready." I ran until my lungs burned and my legs shook. The cold air clawed at my throat, turning every breath into glass. The highway stretched ahead, but no matter how far I pushed, the darkness around me didn't change. Black fields, crooked mile marker, silence broken only by the faint echo of words I couldn't understand. When I finally dared to look back, the Civic was still there, parked on the shoulder like I'd never left it. Its headlights blazed white across the asphalt, illuminating the preacher standing in front of the car, Bible open in his hands. The pages glowed like fire, though no flame touched them. He looked taller now. His coat rippled, though there was no wind. His mouth opened, spilling out that same litany of sharp foreign words, and this time I felt them, each syllable pressing against my ribs, my skull, my heart. I staggered backward, clutching my chest. My heartbeat faltered, slowing, sinking with the rhythm of his chant. "Stop!" I begged, voice cracking. "I don't want any part of this." The preacher's eyes locked onto mine. Twin beams of gray light cut through the dark. "You pulled over," he said simply. "You agreed." I shook my head, tears stinging my eyes. "I was just trying to help." He tilted his head. "That is what you've done." And then he raised one hand, palm outward. The Bible floated between us, pages flapping open to a spread I couldn't read. A low hum filled the night, vibrating the ground beneath my shoes. The asphalt cracked. A jagged line split down the center of the highway, glowing faintly red, like embers buried deep underground. The smell hit me next, burnt iron and sulfur, sharp and choking. I stumbled back, but the mile marker loomed behind me. 66. I had nowhere else to go. From the crack in the asphalt, I heard movement, scraping, claws against stone, something trying to pull itself up. My stomach turned as a pale hand, skeletal and long-fingered, gripped the edge of the road. Another followed, pulling, dragging. "No," I whispered. "God, no." The preacher's voice boomed, words I still couldn't understand. But I knew the meaning. A summons, a ritual, an offering. And then I understood. Me. I tried to run, but my legs locked, frozen like they belonged to someone else. My body lurched forward, dragged step by step toward the crack. Heat blasted my face. Shapes shifted below, writhing, reaching, whispering in voices that sounded like my own. I screamed, thrashing uselessly against the pull. "Please, not me. Take anything else." The preacher's expression never changed. Calm, icy, certain. "You are the altar," he said. The ground gave way beneath me. I pitched forward, arms flailing into the red-lit void. And then, darkness. When I woke, I was lying in bed at my parents' house. Morning light filtered through the curtains. For a second, I thought it had all been a nightmare. My mom's voice drifted up the stairs, calling me down for breakfast. But when I sat up, my chest burned. My shirt clung wet to my skin. I pulled it back and saw black handprints scorched into my flesh, pressed deep like brands. Downstairs, I heard my mom laughing with someone, a man's voice, deep, smooth. I froze, because it was the preacher's voice. I've been a rideshare driver for about 3 years now. Nights are my bread and butter. Drunk college kids, late shift workers, bar hoppers who don't want a DUI. I've seen it all. I've had people puke in my car, couples break up in the back seat, even one guy who tried to pay me in scratch-off tickets. So when I tell you that none of that compares to what I picked up last winter, I need you to believe me. It was a Tuesday night in January, just after 2 a.m. My app pinged with a ride request about 5 miles away, near an empty stretch of road on the edge of town. Normally, I'd decline. Rides that far out usually meant trouble, but it had been a slow night, and the surge pricing was good. I pulled up to the pin drop, headlights sweeping over an old gas station that had been boarded up for years. The windows were black, the sign long gone. But there, standing under the broken canopy, was a figure. At first, I thought it was a woman, thin, hunched against the cold, long hair hanging in her face. She didn't wave or move when I rolled up, just stood there, breathing fog into the night air. I leaned over and pushed the passenger window down a crack. "You call a ride?" The figure nodded once, then moved toward the rear door. I thought nothing of it. Plenty of riders prefer the back seat. She slid in without a word, and the door clicked shut. I glanced in the rear view, pale face, dark hoodie pulled up tight. I couldn't see much else. "No worries," I muttered. "Cold night, huh?" Silence. I put the car in drive. The app showed the drop-off as just across town, near some residential area. Easy money. I turned onto the main road, the tires crunching over salt and slush. The first 5 minutes were quiet. Too quiet. Normally, I don't mind silence, it beats drunk rambling. But there was something about this one that set my teeth on edge. I couldn't hear anything. No cough, no shuffle, no seat creak, just nothing. I checked the mirror again. She was staring at her lap, hair covering her face. I told myself she was tired, maybe high, maybe just one of those awkward passengers who didn't want to chat. Then I heard it, breathing. Not from the back seat, from right behind my ear. Slow, steady, wet breaths that fogged the hair on the side of my head. My stomach flipped. I whipped my head around, expecting to see her leaning forward. But she hadn't moved, still hunched, still staring down. I laughed nervously, trying to shake it off. Maybe the vent was angled weird. Maybe I was hearing echoes. I adjusted the airflow, turned the fan down. The breathing got louder. I gripped the wheel tighter, my pulse climbing. "You okay back there?" I asked, my voice way too thin. She didn't answer, didn't even twitch. I tried again, louder. "Miss, you all right?" Nothing. The breathing was right in my ear now, rhythmic and damp like someone exhaling straight into my skin. I slammed the brakes. The car lurched, my seatbelt locking. The figure in the back didn't react at all, just sat there while I pulled onto the shoulder, chest heaving. I twisted around in my seat. "Look, what the hell are you—" The back seat was empty. But the sound didn't stop. It was louder now. Breathing, right above me. The sound froze me in place. That wet, steady rhythm, rising and falling just above my head, like someone crouched in the dark, pressing their mouth inches from my ear. My scalp prickled, every hair standing on end. I forced myself to glance at the rearview mirror. The back seat was still empty. Nothing but a faint indentation in the fabric, like someone had been sitting there too long. The breathing went on. I couldn't take it anymore. I shoved the shifter into park, ripped the keys from the ignition, and scrambled out into the freezing night. My boots crunched on the salted shoulder as I staggered a few feet away, chest heaving. The road was empty, just my car idling with its hazard lights blinking faintly against the snowbanks. No headlights in either direction, no sound but the distant hum of the engine and the winter wind. I circled the car, hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the door handle. I yanked the back door open, ready to drag someone out by their hood if I had to. Empty. The seat was cold, damp even, like condensation had soaked into the fabric. A faint fog clung to the air inside, swirling lazily before vanishing. I slammed the door shut and backed away. "No," I muttered to myself. "Hell no." I pulled out my phone to call support, maybe even the cops, but the screen just flickered. The rideshare app blinked once, then froze on the map. The little blue arrow showing my location spun wildly in circles before disappearing altogether. That's when the breathing started again. Not above me this time. Inside the car. The sound rattled against the windows, bouncing back and forth like the whole cab was inhaling and exhaling in unison. My knees went weak. I wanted to run, just leave the car there, eat the loss, and never look back. But this car was my livelihood. Without it, I couldn't work. And besides, some stubborn part of me didn't want to believe this was happening. I gritted my teeth, stormed back to the driver's side, and climbed in. "You don't get to scare me out of my own damn car," I said through clenched teeth. The moment I shut the door, the breathing stopped. Silence. For a second, I thought maybe I'd won, that whatever it was had given up. My hands tightened on the wheel, and I jammed the key back in the ignition. The engine roared to life. Then I saw it. The rearview mirror tilted on its own, angling down until it no longer showed the road behind me, just the back seat. And sitting there now, clear as day, was the figure. Hood pulled low, head bowed. Her shoulders rose and fell with each loud, deliberate breath. I spun around. Nothing. The seat was empty. I looked back to the mirror. She was still there. My chest tightened, air catching in my throat. I twisted the mirror back toward the road, refusing to look. Hands slick on the wheel, I threw the car into drive and stomped the gas. The Civic fishtailed on the icy shoulder before straightening out. My eyes stayed locked on the dark road ahead, refusing to glance up, refusing to give her the satisfaction of acknowledgement. But then the sound changed. The breathing was closer, sharper, like it was right at my neck again. And when I finally broke and flicked my eyes upward, the mirror no longer showed the back seat at all. It showed her face, pressed against the glass. Smiling. I tore my eyes from the mirror, heart hammering so hard I thought it might split my chest. For a second, I couldn't breathe at all. The road blurred under my headlights, the snow swirling like ash in the beams, and still that smiling face lingered in my mind. I forced myself to glance up again, just to prove it was gone. The mirror showed only the back seat, empty, dark, silent. I laughed, shaky and hollow. Lack of sleep, I muttered. That's all this is, hallucinations. But the laugh died in my throat as the sound started again. Breathing, slow, deliberate, wet, louder than before, filling the cab, surrounding me. I slammed the radio on. Static. No stations, no music, just hissing noise. The breathing slipped underneath it, threaded through, so no matter how high I cranked the dial, I couldn't drown it out. My chest burned with panic. I needed light, people, anything. Up ahead, a green highway sign glowed faintly in the distance. Rest area, 2 miles. I pushed the gas harder, the Civic rattling as it climbed speed. My fingers cramped around the wheel, knuckles pale. The breathing followed, syncing with the engine's revs, quickening as I accelerated. I burst into the rest stop lot, tires screeching as I swung into a space under the yellow glow of a sodium lamp. The empty picnic benches and vending machines looked like salvation. I killed the engine, fumbled for the door handle, and shoved it open. The night air hit me, silent, cold, real. I stumbled out, sucking it in like water. The breathing didn't follow. I laughed again, nearly sobbing with relief. Jesus, it's in my head, I told myself. It's just in my head. I leaned against the hood, forcing deep breaths, grounding myself with the sting of cold metal under my palms. Slowly, my heartbeat calmed. My thoughts steadied. Then my phone buzzed. I pulled it out with shaking hands. The rideshare app had popped back open on its own. A notification slid across the screen. Passenger still waiting. Resume ride? My stomach flipped. I hadn't marked the trip as complete. I hadn't even canceled. The app still thought someone was in the back seat. I swallowed hard, hit end ride, and shoved the phone back into my pocket. When I looked up, my blood turned to ice. Inside the Civic, through the windshield, I saw her again. Head bowed, hood pulled low. Shoulders rising and falling with each breath. I blinked, rubbed my eyes. Empty, just the seat. I blinked again. She was back. I staggered backward, nearly slipping on the icy asphalt. "No," I whispered. "You're not real." The car horn blared. Long, sharp, deafening. The lights flashed once, twice, then everything went dead. Silence. I stood frozen under the buzzing lamp for what felt like forever, waiting for movement, for sound, for anything. But the car sat still, empty. Eventually, I forced myself back inside. I had to. I couldn't leave my only source of income sitting abandoned in some rest stop lot. I climbed behind the wheel, hands trembling, and started the engine. The heater roared back to life. Warmth filled the cabin. No breathing, no reflection, just me, tired, strung out, chasing shadows. I drove home with the radio humming soft static, convinced myself I was safe. But sometimes, on quiet nights, when the road is empty, I hear it again. A slow, steady exhale brushing against my ear. I never know if it's the vent, my imagination, or something that never left. And the worst part, neither do you. I've been a trucker for over 15 years. Long-haul runs, coast to coast. You spend that much time on the highways, you start hearing stories about phantom lights, dead stretches of road, ghost towns. Most of it is campfire talk to keep drivers awake. I never believed a damn word of it. But there's one story that stuck with me, whether I wanted it to or not. The mile marker man. Other drivers swore up and down that if you drove Route 44 after midnight, you'd see him. Always at the same spot. Mile marker 128, standing there with his thumb out, waiting. Some said he was a drifter who froze to death one winter. Others claimed he was a serial killer, and what you saw wasn't a ghost but the echo of a predator still hunting. Me? I thought it was nonsense. Until last fall, when I was hauling a load through Indiana, and I saw him for myself. It was 1 a.m., and I was fighting off fatigue with my third cup of burnt gas station coffee. The road stretched flat and empty, no taillights, no headlights, just the endless white lines rolling under me. I'd just passed mile marker 127 when my high beams caught movement on the shoulder. A man. Tall, thin, dressed in dark clothes, thumb out. My grip tightened on the wheel. My stomach dropped. The stories slammed into my head all at once. I glanced at the dash clock, 1:03 a.m. I tried to laugh at myself. Just a hitchhiker, I told myself. Nothing more. But when I passed, he lifted his head. His face was pale, features sharp like they'd been carved with a knife. His eyes glowed faintly in the beams, not reflecting like animal eyes, but burning, steady like coals. And even though I was moving at 60 miles an hour, I swear I felt his gaze track me, follow me, pin me in place. I didn't stop. I pressed harder on the accelerator, muttering, "Nope, nope, nope," under my breath. A mile later, my heart finally slowed. My hands unclenched from the wheel. I told myself it was just some drifter, maybe a junkie with reflective eyes. Nothing supernatural, nothing worth losing my mind over. Then I saw the next mile marker, and standing beneath it, him, same height, same clothes, same glowing eyes, thumb out. I nearly choked. "No way," I muttered. I'd just passed him. I checked my mirrors, half expecting to see him still behind me, nothing but empty asphalt. I pressed harder on the gas. My rig rattled as the speed climbed. My palms slicked the wheel. When I hit mile 129, I dared a glance to the shoulder. Empty. Relief washed over me so strong it made me lightheaded. "See, just tired," I whispered. "Brains playing tricks." The road stretched quiet and straight ahead. I kept driving, checking the mirrors, scanning the dark. My heartbeat finally settled into something steady. Until I saw the next sign, mile 128. Again. And he was there. This time, closer to the lane, his arm raised higher, palm turned upward like he was waiting for me specifically. I slammed the brakes. The truck groaned, tires screaming against the pavement. My coffee cup toppled, spilling across the dash. My whole body shook as I sat there in the middle of the road. Headlights locked on him. He didn't move, didn't blink, just raised his hand a little higher, beckoning me forward. And then, through the windshield, his lips began to move. I sat frozen, hands gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles ached. The mile marker man stood there in the glow of my high beams, lips moving in slow, deliberate shapes I couldn't hear. The road around me was dead quiet, the kind of silence that presses into your ears until you start hearing your own pulse. Finally, I snapped out of it. I shoved the rig into gear and slammed my foot on the accelerator. The trailer groaned, tires screeched, and I roared past him. For a split second as I passed, I swear I heard his voice inside the cab, low, whispering, like someone sitting in the passenger seat. I didn't look. Couldn't. I just kept my eyes locked on the endless strip of asphalt. A minute later, I passed the next sign. Mile 129. Relief almost knocked the wind out of me. I laughed, high-pitched and shaky. See? Just a trick. Tired eyes, that's all. But a mile later, the sign came again. Mile 128. And he was there. Closer now. Standing in the road itself, dead center in the lane, arms spread wide like he was daring me to hit him. I slammed the horn, the blast echoing across the empty fields. But he didn't flinch. I swerved into the opposite lane, trailer fishtailing behind me. For a second, the truck rocked so hard I thought I'd lose it. My stomach lurched as the wheels kissed the shoulder before I straightened out. When I glanced back in the mirror, the road was empty. No body. No trace. My chest heaved, sweat dripping down my temple. He's not real, I told myself. He's not real, he's not… The radio crackled. At first, just static. Then a voice slipped through. Low, flat, repeating the same words over and over. Mile 128, mile 128, mile 128. I tore the dial off, ripped the knob straight out of the dash, but the voice didn't stop. It filled the cab, everywhere at once, like the speakers themselves were breathing the words. I stomped the pedal, determined to outrun it. The speedometer climbed past 70, then 80. My rig rattled and groaned, the trailer swaying dangerously, but I couldn't stop. I had to put distance between me and that mile marker. Signs whipped past in a blur. 129, 130, 131. Relief bubbled in my chest. Then, headlights cut the dark ahead, my own. The rig. Another truck, identical to mine, barreling toward me head-on. I screamed, yanking the wheel hard right. The trailer fishtailed, tires shrieked, and I barely kept from rolling as I skidded onto the shoulder. My coffee thermos hit the floor, metal clanging against metal. When I lifted my head, the road ahead was empty. No truck, no lights, nothing. My hands shook violently against the wheel. I was seconds from pulling over and abandoning the whole damn rig when I saw him again. Not on the shoulder, not in the lane, in the mirror. The mile marker man sat in my sleeper cab, legs folded neatly, eyes glowing in the dark. His lips were still moving, slow and patient, and though no sound came out, I could read them perfectly this time. Almost there. I couldn't drive another second with him in the cab. My chest seized every time I glanced at the mirror and saw those glowing eyes watching me from the sleeper. His lips kept moving, soundless, shaping the same words over and over. Almost there, almost there. I swerved onto the shoulder, rig rattling as I slammed the brakes. Gravel sprayed, my seatbelt locked tight against my chest. The truck groaned to a stop, and I just sat there, panting, staring at the mirror. Empty. The sleeper was empty. I laughed, half hysterical, pounding the wheel with my palm. I'm losing it, I muttered. It's the hours, the damn caffeine. I'm seeing things. I threw the door open, sucking in the freezing air. The night was silent except for the tick of the cooling engine. My boots crunched on gravel as I stumbled out, shaking so bad my knees nearly gave. That's when I saw the sign. Mile 128. I turned slowly. Behind me, stretching in both directions, was the same crooked marker, the same patch of weeds at its base, the same stretch of empty blacktop. I'd never left. My throat tightened. No, I whispered. That's not possible. The cab light flicked on by itself. My stomach dropped. I turned back to the truck, and my headlights caught him, sitting in the driver's seat now. His pale hands gripped the wheel, his glowing eyes locked on mine. He smiled. I staggered backward, breath ripping out of me in clouds. "It's my truck!" I shouted. "Get out!" He didn't move, didn't speak, just kept smiling as his lips shaped the words again. Almost there. The engine roared. The rig rolled forward, slow at first, then faster, headlights cutting into the night. I stumbled into the ditch, scraping my hands on frozen weeds, watching my own truck thunder past me, trailer rattling behind it. And then, silence. The road was empty. My chest heaved. I scrambled up the ditch, scanning wildly, but the truck was gone, vanished into black. For a long time, I just stood there, alone, freezing. Eventually, headlights appeared in the distance, a small sedan, humming steady toward me. I stumbled into the lane, waving my arms like a madman. The car slowed, then stopped a few yards away. The window rolled down, and a middle-aged guy leaned out. "You all right, buddy? You look half dead." I staggered closer. "Please, you have to get me out of here. Don't stop at mile 128. Don't." Then I saw the sign behind him. Mile 128. And in his back seat, just barely visible under the dome light, a pale figure sat with folded hands, eyes glowing faintly. I screamed, pounding the hood with both fists. "Drive! Get the hell out of here! Don't look at him!" But the driver only frowned, confused. "Who?" The pale figure leaned forward, resting one cold hand on the man's shoulder. His lips moved, patient and steady, almost there. The sedan pulled away, taillights shrinking into the night. I was left on the shoulder, alone again, with the crooked mile marker standing at my back. And I knew what every trucker had meant when they told the story. The mile marker man doesn't just haunt one driver. He waits at that spot, forever, hitching a ride to whoever's foolish enough to pass after midnight. And I was no longer the driver. I was the witness. I'm not a man who scares easy. I've worked night shifts at a steel plant for almost 2 decades, and when you're used to walking home past roaring furnaces and shadowed machinery at 3 a.m., a dark road doesn't rattle you much. But there's one ride I gave that night that I'll never forget. It had been a brutal shift, 12 hours straight, my clothes stinking of oil and metal. By the time I clocked out, the sky had opened up. Sheets of cold rain hammered the lot, bouncing off the asphalt like silver needles. I just wanted to get home, peel out of my boots, and collapse. Halfway down the county road, I saw her. She was standing on the shoulder, soaked to the bone, hair plastered against her face. No umbrella, no coat, just a white dress clinging to her like wet paper. She didn't wave me down, didn't even look at me at first, just stood there, arms limp at her sides, head tilted down. I slowed, because any human being would. Nobody deserved to be out in that storm. I rolled the window down a crack, rain spattering my arm. "You need a ride?" I shouted over the hiss of the wipers. She turned her head slowly. Her face was pale, lips blue, eyes wide and unblinking. "Yes," she whispered. I unlocked the door, and she slid into the passenger seat. Her clothes dripped onto the floor mats, soaking them through, but she didn't shiver, didn't even wrap her arms around herself. She just sat there, staring at the dash with this hollow, expectant look. "Where you headed?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "The woods." Her voice was flat, soft, like she'd rehearsed the line 100 times. I chuckled nervously. "That's a little vague." "Which woods?" She didn't answer. I swallowed, shifted into drive. Maybe she was drunk, maybe on something harder. I figured I'd drop her near one of the hunting trails that cut through the county, then head home and forget it. The cab filled with the damp, sour smell of wet fabric. My heater roared, but she stayed cold, the air around her so sharp it made my teeth ache. After a few minutes, I tried again. "You got family nearby?" This time, she turned her head toward me, slowly. Her eyes locked on mine, and I nearly jerked the wheel. Her pupils were huge, swallowing almost all the color. "They're already in the woods," she whispered. A chill crawled up my spine. I forced a laugh, though it cracked halfway out. "That so?" She smiled faintly, but it wasn't a happy smile, more like she'd just won an argument I didn't know I was part of. I kept my eyes on the slick blacktop, heart thudding. My mind raced through rationalizations. Maybe she was part of some weird backwoods cult. Maybe she was just screwing with me. Either way, I told myself, I'd drop her at the next turnout and be done with it. The road curved, and through the rain I saw it. A gravel pull-off I knew well, leading into the old forest preserve. The lot was empty, the gate chained. "That where you're headed?" I asked. Her head tilted, strands of wet hair sticking to her face. "Yes." I slowed, my tires crunching into the gravel. The woods loomed ahead, black and endless. When I glanced back at her seat, my stomach dropped. It was empty. The fabric was drenched, water dripping onto the mat, but she was gone. And then, from the back seat, right behind my head, her voice whispered, "You brought me home." Her whisper slid down my spine like an icicle. I snapped my head around, half expecting to see her leaning forward from the back seat. But the rear bench was empty. Rain streaked the windows, reflecting only darkness and the faint glow of my dashboard. Still, I felt her. The air was heavy, charged, the way it gets before lightning strikes. "Lady, I don't know what kind of game this is, but it ain't funny," I muttered, voice shaking more than I wanted it to. No answer. I slammed the gear into reverse, tires spitting gravel as I backed out of the turnout. My only thought was to get back to the main road, drop this whole nightmare, and drive home, like none of it happened. But when my headlights swept the trees, I froze. She was standing at the tree line, same pale dress, plastered to her skin, same hair hanging wet across her face. Only now her arms were raised, palms open, like she was beckoning me deeper into the woods. My heart thundered. "Nope," I said, slamming the wheel to straighten onto the asphalt. I stomped the gas. The car fishtailed on the wet road before catching traction. I drove blind, wipers slapping frantically, speed climbing higher than it should have on a night like that. For a while, nothing happened, just rain and the endless dark. My breathing steadied, though my hands still shook. I almost convinced myself I'd imagined her at the tree line. Then the heater cut out. The cab went instantly cold, my breath fogging in the air. The smell hit me next, not wet fabric this time, but damp earth, rotting leaves, mushrooms, the sharp tang of moss, the smell of deep woods after rain. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." I glanced at the passenger seat. She was back, her head lolled against the window, hair clinging to the glass, lips curved in that faint, unnatural smile. Water dripped from her fingers onto the seat. I swerved, nearly clipping the guardrail. My stomach lurched. I blinked hard, desperate for her to vanish again. But she didn't. She sat upright now, slowly turning her head toward me. Her pupils glistened in the dashlight, huge and hungry. "You shouldn't leave them waiting," she whispered. I gripped the wheel so tight my fingers cramped. "Leave who?" I croaked. She didn't answer, just lifted one pale, dripping hand and pointed ahead. I followed her finger with my eyes, and nearly screamed. The road no longer stretched toward town. Somehow I was back at the gravel turnout, the chained gate yawning open. Beyond it, the trees loomed taller, thicker, their branches clawing at the sky. My foot hit the brake, but the car didn't stop. The engine growled, pulling me forward like it wasn't under my control anymore. The chain across the gate dragged on the ground, broken links sparking under my tires. "No, no, no," I shouted, slamming both feet on the pedal. The car only surged faster. Beside me, she leaned closer, her wet hair brushing my arm. The cold radiating off her felt like dry ice pressed against my skin. "Almost home," she whispered. The trees swallowed the headlights. Branches scraped the roof like claws. My stomach dropped as the asphalt gave way to dirt, the car bucking over roots and stones. I yanked at the wheel, but it might as well have been welded in place. The woods closed around us, darker than the storm itself. And just ahead, barely visible through the trees, a faint yellow glow flickered. Lanterns, dozens of them swaying between the trunks, and shapes moved there, waiting. The lanterns swayed in the trees, bobbing like will-o'-the-wisps. Yellow light cut through the storm, flickering across faces that shouldn't have been there. Figures, dozens of them, standing between the trunks, men, women, children. Their clothes clung to them like they'd all walked through the same storm. Pale skin, hollow eyes, and every one of them staring straight at me. My stomach dropped. My hands slammed the wheel, jerking side to side, but the car didn't respond. It kept rolling deeper, pulled by some invisible current. The girl beside me leaned closer, her voice brushing against my ear. "They've been waiting." I swallowed hard, throat dry. "For what?" Her lips twitched into that faint smile. "For you." The woods swallowed the car whole. Branches clawed the roof, leaves whipping across the windshield. My headlights barely touched the dirt path ahead. The lanterns moved with us, always just ahead, guiding or trapping. The smell grew stronger. Wet earth, moss, rot. It was everywhere now, seeping into my lungs, clinging to my clothes. My skin prickled with damp cold until it felt like the storm itself was inside me. I pressed both feet down on the brake, screamed at the car to stop, but the pedal sank uselessly under my boots. The engine roared, unyielding. When I looked back up, the figures had formed a circle in a clearing ahead. Lanterns lined the perimeter, swaying in perfect rhythm. The car rolled to a halt at the center. The engine died on its own. Silence fell heavy, broken only by the patter of rain on leaves. I turned to the girl. She was already gone. The seat beside me dripped water, empty. The door clicked open. I froze, too terrified to move. The smell of rot thickened, choking me. A dozen shadows leaned closer from the tree line, their eyes catching the lantern glow. Something cold brushed my shoulder. I spun. She was in the back seat now, leaning forward, her wet hair brushing my cheek. Her smile had widened, stretching too far. "You brought us another," she whispered. The clearing erupted in whispers, not loud, not shouted, but dozens of voices overlapping in perfect unison. Words I couldn't make out, syllables sharp and heavy, echoing against the trees. I shoved the door open and stumbled out into the mud. My boots sank, sucking at the earth. The figures closed in, their pale faces flickering in the lantern light. None of them blinked. None of them spoke. They just stared. I ran. I don't remember choosing a direction. I just bolted into the trees, crashing through wet undergrowth, branches slapping my face. My lungs burned, heart hammering, but I didn't stop until the light faded behind me. Finally, I burst out of the trees and onto asphalt. I fell to my knees, gasping. The rain still poured. The storm still raged. And there, just to my right, stood the crooked mile marker at the start of County Road 12. The turnout was gone. No chained gate, no forest preserve, just open highway stretching into the dark. I staggered to my feet, shaking, and sprinted back to my car. The Civic sat idling at the shoulder, driver's door hanging open. The seat beside mine was empty. I drove home that night, and somehow the road stayed straight. But I've never gone back to that county line. Still, sometimes when it rains, I hear her voice in the static of the radio. Soft, patient. You brought me home. And I know one night soon, she'll ask me to drive again. I'm a nurse. I don't say that to brag, just so you'll understand why I stopped that night. My whole job is built around helping people, and I couldn't bring myself to pass by someone who looked like they needed it. It was early spring, damp and chilly, the kind of evening where fog clings low to the ground. I was driving home after a double shift at the hospital, half dazed from exhaustion, when I spotted him on the shoulder. An old man. He wore a faded military jacket, the kind with patches that had long since lost their stitching. His cap was pulled low, and he leaned on a cane, thumb stuck out like he'd been hitching for hours. I slowed before I could think better of it. He looked too frail to be standing out there alone. I rolled the window down. "You need a lift, sir?" He nodded once, polite. "VA hospital," he said. His voice rasped but steady. "Hop in," I offered. He climbed in with surprising ease, settling into the passenger seat with the kind of posture that made me think of drill sergeants. His jacket smelled faintly of tobacco and something older. Mothballs, maybe. "You a veteran?" I asked as I pulled back onto the road. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "Long time ago." "Which branch?" He smiled faintly. "Army. 77th Division." The name rang a bell from a history class, but I couldn't place it. "That's impressive," I said. He nodded, eyes fixed on the foggy road ahead. For a while we drove in silence, just the hum of the engine and the soft tap of rain on the windshield. After a few minutes, I noticed something strange. His jacket was spotless, no dirt, no wear, even though he'd been standing on a muddy shoulder. The cane he leaned on looked brand new, polished wood without a single scratch. I brushed it off. Maybe he took pride in his appearance. Plenty of old-timers did. But then he spoke again, his voice low. "You ever hear the Argonne?" "The battle?" I asked. "World War I, right?" He nodded slowly. "I was there." I almost laughed, thinking I'd misheard him. He looked old, sure, but not that old. 90, maybe 95 at most. But the Argonne was more than a century ago. "You mean your father?" I corrected. His eyes shifted to mine, cold, steady. "No," he said. "Me." The car felt smaller suddenly, the air heavier. I forced a chuckle. "Guess you don't look a day over 120. He didn't smile. We drove on, the fog thickening until the world outside was nothing but white. My GPS lost signal, the map freezing on a blank grid. "You took the wrong road," he murmured. I frowned. "Excuse me?" "This road doesn't go where you think." I glanced at him. His face looked different in the glow of the dash, sharper, hollower. His eyes glistened wet, like they were full of tears he'd never shed. The fog outside shifted, revealing dark shapes, trees where there shouldn't have been any. The road curved when I swore it should have been straight. My stomach turned. "Look," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Maybe you should tell me exactly where you need to go." He leaned closer, his breath icy against my cheek. "Back to the battlefield." I gripped the wheel tighter, heart slamming against my ribs. And in the reflection of the windshield, just for a second, I didn't see my Civic anymore. I saw a convoy of old army trucks rumbling through mud, lanterns swaying, silhouettes of soldiers packed shoulder to shoulder in the back, and the old man beside me, suddenly young, grinning under his helmet. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes, and the reflection of trucks and soldiers was gone. Just my Civic again, wipers swiping across the glass. But my chest stayed tight, heart pounding, like I'd just woken from a nightmare. The old man sat silent, staring out at the fog as if he hadn't noticed. "Must have dozed off for a second," I muttered, trying to laugh it off. His lips twitched, not into a smile, more like the memory of one. "You didn't doze," he said softly. "You saw it." I tightened my grip on the wheel. "Look, sir, if this is some kind of joke..." "Do I look like I'm joking?" His voice cut sharper this time, hard enough to make me flinch. Silence filled the car again, heavier now. The heater blasted, but I still shivered. My hands felt stiff, my fingertips numb. That's when I noticed the condensation. It coated the inside of the windshield. My breath came in clouds, and his should have too. But the passenger side was clear. No fog. Nothing. My throat went dry. "You fought at the Argonne, huh?" I asked, forcing casual conversation. "Yes." His gaze stayed fixed on the fog outside. "We never came home." I chuckled nervously. "Clearly you did." His head turned then, slow as rusted gears, until his gray eyes locked onto mine. They weren't wet anymore. They were black. Empty. "No," he whispered. "Not yet." The road curved again where it shouldn't. I knew this highway, driven it 100 times, and it had never wound through woods like this. but the fog lifted just enough for me to see trenches carved into the earth on either side. I nearly slammed the brakes. They were trenches. Timber supports sagging under the weight of mud, barbed wire curling like vines, rusted helmets half buried in muck. And shadows moved down there, soldiers with hollow faces, rifles slung across their backs, marching endlessly. "This isn't real," I hissed. The old soldier beside me leaned forward, palms braced on his cane. "It's always real." The engine sputtered, then coughed. My headlights flickered, dimming until the beams barely cut the fog. The car slowed on its own. I stomped the gas. Nothing. "Come on, come on." I slapped the wheel. The soldier straightened, folding his hands in his lap like a man waiting for a bus. "You can't outrun it. None of us could." Panic clawed up my throat. I shoved the gear into reverse, twisted to look behind, only to see nothing. No road, no trees, just black void stretching forever. I snapped my head forward. The fog parted ahead, revealing a blasted clearing. Barbed wire snarled across the ground. Broken rifles jutted from the mud like grave markers, and lantern lights swayed through the haze. Figures emerged one by one, soldiers in rotted uniforms, boots sinking into the muck, their faces pale and slack, eyes clouded, each step squelched with mud that smelled of rot and iron. They circled the car slowly, their whispers overlapping in a low drone. I couldn't make out the words, but the rhythm chilled me. A chant, a prayer. The old soldier finally turned to me again, his expression calm, almost kind. "You shouldn't have stopped." I shook my head violently. "I was helping you." "And so you joined us." The fog pressed closer, thick and suffocating. The soldier's whispers grew louder, filling the cab until it buzzed in my skull. My vision blurred with tears. Then, in the rearview mirror, I saw something that made my stomach twist. The back seat wasn't empty anymore. 3 young men sat there in WWI uniforms, helmets strapped, rifles across their laps. Their eyes were cloudy, their mouths moving in the same whispering chant. And all 3 stared directly at me. The 3 soldiers in the back seat whispered steadily, their cloudy eyes fixed on me. I couldn't understand the words, but the rhythm dug under my skin, worming straight into my skull. My hands shook on the wheel. "Get out!" I shouted, twisting around, voice breaking. "Get out of my car!" They didn't react. Their lips kept moving, pale throats working in unison. The air inside the cab grew heavier with every word, thick and wet, smelling of mud and blood. Beside me, the old soldier sat perfectly calm. "They've waited a long time," he said softly. "We all have." I couldn't take it anymore. I yanked the wheel hard left, hoping the jolt would throw them off. The Civic skidded, tires hissing against wet mud, but when the car straightened, they were still there, still chanting. The fog pressed tighter. Shapes moved in it, dozens, maybe hundreds more, circling just beyond the lantern glow. Boots squelched, rifles clinked, voices whispered. A whole battalion of the dead. The soldier's voice cut through them. "Do you hear the call?" "No!" I screamed, my throat raw. "I don't belong here!" He leaned closer, eyes dark voids. "Neither did we. But the earth remembers. The road remembers, and it drags us back." I jammed the shifter into reverse, slammed the pedal. The engine roared, but instead of backing away, the car lurched forward, deeper into the clearing. The headlights washed over a tangle of broken helmets and bones jutting from the mud. The soldiers in the back seat grew louder, their whispers rising to a chant. My ears rang, blood pounding. I clutched the wheel, desperate. "No," I muttered. "Not like this." The old soldier tilted his head. "Then fight." Something in me snapped. I floored the gas. The Civic jolted, tires spinning, mud spraying like black blood. I aimed straight for the fog ahead, refusing to look at the figures closing in. The chants rose higher, filling every inch of the world around me. I screamed, a raw, primal sound, forcing the wheel straight. I am not yours. For a heartbeat, the fog resisted. Then it shattered like glass. I burst through onto empty highway. My chest heaved, eyes stinging with tears. The road stretched clean and familiar, asphalt gleaming wet in the headlights. No trenches, no soldiers. Just me. The old man's seat was empty. The back seat, too. Silence. I drove, hands trembling, until the lights of town finally appeared on the horizon. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the first gray streaks of dawn touched the sky. I sat there in the car, engine idling, unable to move. My floor mats were still soaked in mud. Not the clean brown of rainwater dirt, but black, heavy sludge that stank of iron and rot. I quit the hospital a week later. Couldn't take night shifts anymore. Couldn't risk that road. But sometimes, when fog drifts low across the street outside my apartment, I swear I hear it again. The distant sound of boots squelching in mud, the chant of men who never came home. I fought to escape. I survived. But I know they're still marching. And next time, I might not be strong enough to keep from joining. I bartend at a dive downtown, the kind of place that smells like spilled beer no matter how many times you mop. Closing shifts mean I don't get out until way past 2 in the morning. By the time I lock the doors, count the till, and scrape gum off bar stools, the streets are empty. No traffic, no people, just me and my rusty old Corolla heading home. That's why I didn't think twice when I saw the girl standing under the streetlight that night. It was exactly 3:07 a.m. I remember because I'd just glanced at the clock when my headlights swept across her. She was young, maybe early 20s, wearing a thin hoodie zipped to her chin. No bag, no phone in sight, just standing there with her thumb out, shivering like she'd been waiting hours. I should have kept driving. Every instinct told me to, but exhaustion makes you careless, and loneliness makes you stupid. I slowed, rolled down the window. You headed somewhere? I asked. She stepped closer, her sneakers soaked from the damp pavement. Just outside town, she said softly. You'll see the turnoff. I nodded. Hop in. She slid into the passenger seat, pulling the hoodie tighter around herself. Her hair was damp, clinging to her cheeks, though the night was dry. For a while, neither of us spoke. The tires hummed. The engine rattled, and the silence stretched. I cleared my throat. Rough night? She didn't answer right away. Then, in a low voice, she asked, Do you see him? I frowned. See who? Her eyes flicked toward the window. The man running beside the car. My stomach dropped. I snapped my head toward her side of the road. Nothing. Just empty asphalt and the blur of streetlights. I laughed nervously. Guess I'm too tired for jokes. But her face didn't change. She kept her gaze fixed outside, eyes wide, lips trembling. He's been keeping up since you stopped for me, she whispered. My grip tightened on the wheel. Look, I don't see anyone. You're just... The sound hit me before I finished. Footsteps. Heavy, rapid thuds against the wet pavement, perfectly matching the speed of the car. I killed the radio. The sound didn't stop. Thud, 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 right beside her door. My chest tightened. Probably a loose belt, I muttered, though I knew no engine made that noise. I pressed the gas, speeding up. The footsteps quickened, keeping pace. The girl whimpered, curling into herself. Don't look at him, she begged. But of course I did. For a split second, my headlights caught it. A figure sprinting on all fours, body too long, limbs bending wrong, face a blur of pale skin. Its hands slapped the pavement like hooves, yet it moved faster than any human should. I jerked the wheel, swerving into the opposite lane. The figure vanished into the dark. My breath came fast, ragged. When I glanced back at her, tears streaked her face. You shouldn't have looked, she whispered. I forced a laugh that cracked halfway out. It was just a trick of the lights. But then the sound came again. Thud, 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 thud. Only this time it wasn't outside. It was on the roof. The thudding rattled through the Corolla's thin metal roof, each impact so heavy I swore the ceiling would cave. My heart hammered in sync with it, panic clawing at my chest. The girl buried her face in her hands. Don't stop. Whatever you do, don't stop. I swallowed hard, pressed the accelerator. The engine groaned, but the car surged forward. Streetlights whipped past, flickering across the windshield. The pounding on the roof kept pace, never missing a beat. Christ, I muttered, sweat slicking my palms. It's gotta be, what, a branch? Maybe a raccoon? The words sounded ridiculous, even as they left my mouth. Branches don't sprint, raccoons don't weigh 200 pounds. I risked a glance upward. The ceiling sagged in spots, denting inward with each thud. Dust drifted from the liner. Floating in the glow of the dash, the girl whimpered. He knows you saw him. Who the hell is he? I snapped. She didn't answer, just curled tighter into the seat, as if making herself small would save her. I pressed harder on the gas. 90, 95. The Corolla shook like it might rattle apart, but the pounding only grew louder. Then came another sound, scraping. Nails dragging across metal, slow and deliberate, tracing the roof above my head. My stomach churned. I swerved across the empty lanes, hoping momentum would fling it off. Nothing. The scraping followed, steady, patient. Then the roof bulged downward. A handprint pressed through from above, long fingers stretching the metal like putty. Another followed, then a face. The ceiling sagged inches from my head, the pale imprint of features pushing through. Hollow eyes, a slit of a mouth opening wider, wider, until the roof itself groaned with the strain. I screamed and slammed the brakes. The Corolla fishtailed, tires shrieking against wet pavement. The girl clutched the dash, crying out. The pounding stopped. For a heartbeat, silence. Then, thud, the trunk buckled. Thud, thud. The rear window spiderwebbed with cracks. He's coming in, the girl sobbed. I threw the car in drive, tires squealing as I floored it. The Corolla roared down the highway, speedometer needle trembling. My breath came ragged, my vision blurred with panic. But no matter how fast I drove, the pounding moved closer. Roof, trunk, then the backseat door. Each hit dented the metal inward, closer and closer to us. Hold on! I shouted, wrenching the wheel. I veered into a narrow side road, headlights cutting across empty farmland. Gravel spat from under the tires as I skidded onto the shoulder. For a second, the pounding stopped. My chest heaved, sweat dripping into my eyes. I dared a glance at the mirror, and nearly lost control. He was running beside us again, not on all fours this time, upright. Too tall, too thin, arms swinging like pendulums. His head hung low, face hidden, but his speed matched mine perfectly. Each step slammed the earth so hard I felt it through the steering column. The girl screamed, "Don't let him look in!" Before I could ask what she meant, the figure snapped its head up. His face slammed against the passenger window, pale skin stretched tight over bone, mouth open wide enough to split. Black teeth scraped the glass as he grinned at me. The window fogged from his breath, and then a hairline crack split across the glass, branching like lightning. The crack spidered wider across the passenger window. My breath caught. The girl pressed herself into the seat, whimpering, "Don't let it in! Don't let it in!" Another impact shook the car. The glass groaned, splinters spreading like frost. My knuckles whitened on the wheel. "Hold on!" I shouted, as if words could protect either of us. I slammed the accelerator, the Corolla screaming as it hit 90 again. The road blurred under the headlights. My pulse pounded louder than the engine, but the face never left the glass. It matched our speed effortlessly, pale skin stretched in that hideous grin, black teeth clicking against the cracking window. "Get away!" I screamed, swerving hard. The car fishtailed, gravel spraying, but when I looked again, he was still there, still grinning. The girl sobbed, her voice breaking. You shouldn't have looked at him. Once you see him, he never stops. My stomach sank. What do you mean, never? She just shook her head, tears streaking down her face. He runs forever. The window shattered. Glass rained across the seat. Cold wind blasted in, stinging my skin. The figure's hand shot through, impossibly long fingers hooking into the frame. The metal bent like foil under his grip. I screamed, swatting at his arm, but the skin was like stone, ice cold and unyielding. The girl clawed at her door, trying to shove it open, but it wouldn't budge. The figure pulled himself lower, his shoulders forcing through the broken frame. His grin split wider, jaw unhinging until it stretched nearly to his chest. A sound poured out, like footsteps, but inside my head. An endless pounding rhythm that drowned out thought, drowned out breath, drowned out me. The steering wheel jerked. My arms flailed uselessly as the Corolla swerved off the road, crashing through a ditch, bouncing violently. We hit something. Rocks. A stump. I don't know. The airbags exploded, knocking the air from my lungs. Dazed, ears ringing, I looked sideways. The girl was gone, her seat empty, soaked only with rain and shards of glass. The figure crouched half inside the car now, twisted limbs filling the passenger side. His face hovered inches from mine, grin stretching wider than human bone should allow. I fumbled for the door handle, but his hand shot out, pinning my wrist with crushing force. Pain lanced up my arm, hot and sharp. His breath hit me full in the face, damp, heavy, like rotting earth. Then he spoke. Not words, not a language. Just that same pounding rhythm, louder now, shaking my skull until my vision blurred. It wasn't a sound anymore. It was my heartbeat. My pulse synced with it, faster, harder, until it felt like my chest would explode. My vision went black at the edges. I screamed, though I couldn't hear it over the endless thud, thud, thud. The last thing I saw before everything faded was his grin, teeth black and endless, filling the whole world. They found my car the next morning in a ditch outside town. Windows shattered, body crumpled. The cops said I must have lost control after a long shift. A tragic accident, nothing more. But they never explained the footprints. Bare, wet prints circling the wreck in the mud. Dozens of them, and all of them leading away at a dead sprint. I'm not from around here, just a tourist, passing through this little Midwest town on a week-long road trip. I like taking back roads, quieter, more scenic, and you stumble on diners that feel frozen in time. That's what I told myself the night I stopped for the Hitchhiker. It was near dusk, the sky smeared orange and purple, the fields stretching flat for miles. I'd been driving since morning, bored of my own playlist when I saw him. A man standing by the highway shoulder. Thumb out. He looked ordinary enough. Jeans, flannel shirt, short hair, maybe mid-30s. He didn't look threatening. No bag, though, and no car in sight. Just standing there, like he'd been waiting all day. I slowed, rolled the window down. Need a lift? He nodded once, polite. Just into town. Hop in. He slid into the passenger seat, nodded again in thanks, and folded his hands neatly in his lap. He didn't smell of sweat or dirt, which surprised me. Just neutral, like air. We drove. For a while, silence stretched between us. I tried small talk. You live around here? Yes, he said. His voice was steady, deep, almost rehearsed. Family nearby? Yes. That was all I got. One-word answers, each one clipped, deliberate. I gave up, turned the radio low. Static hissed. Then faint country music came through. After about 15 minutes, we reached the outskirts of town. Neon signs glowed faintly, streetlights buzzed. I slowed at an intersection. Where should I drop you? Here is fine, he said. I pulled to the curb. He opened the door, stepped out without a glance back, and walked into the shadows between two old brick buildings. I shrugged, pulled back into traffic, and drove another block before it hit me. The passenger door never shut. It was wide open, swinging in the wind. I slammed the brakes, heart pounding, and jumped out. The seat was empty. No sign of him on the sidewalk, no footsteps, nothing. Just an open door creaking like it had never been touched. Confused, I shut it and climbed back in, palms slick on the wheel. I told myself I must have been distracted, maybe too tired to notice him close it. Maybe he ducked into a side alley faster than I realized. I tried to let it go. But 10 minutes later, as I rolled into town square, a set of headlights flashed behind me. A cruiser. Red and blue lights flicked on. I pulled over, nerves buzzing. The cop walked up, flashlight sweeping my window. "Evening," he said. "Everything all right?" "Yeah," I said quickly. "Why?" He glanced at the passenger seat. His jaw tightened. "You had someone with you." My stomach dropped. "What?" "Man in a flannel. We saw you pick him up on the highway. You still giving him a ride?" I looked at the seat. Empty. My chest tightened. He got out a few blocks ago." The cop's expression didn't change. He clicked his pen once against his notepad. "That's funny, because the man you just described, he died out there 5 years ago, hitchhiking. Drunk driver hit him, right near mile marker 12. My hands trembled against the wheel. "No, you don't understand. He was right here. He sat in this seat." The cop's flashlight beam lingered on the upholstery. My breath caught. The fabric wasn't just damp, it was soaked through, dripping onto the mat below, and the smell hit me, the thick, sour stench of blood. The smell turned my stomach, metallic, sharp, unmistakable. I leaned back from the seat, gagging, my hands shaking on the wheel. The cop's flashlight beam lingered on the soaked fabric for a moment before he snapped it off. "Stay in town tonight," he said, voice low, "and don't drive that road after dark again." Then he walked back to his cruiser, leaving me frozen in the driver's seat, staring at the spreading stain. I told myself I was exhausted, that the rain must have leaked in somehow, soaking the seat, and my brain was twisting the smell. I drove to the motel I'd booked, parked under the flickering lot light, and forced myself inside. But when I came back out the next morning, the seat was bone dry. Not a mark, not a smell. Clean as if nothing had happened. I convinced myself it was stress, nerves, a long day on the road. I loaded my bag, grabbed a coffee, and hit the highway again. For the first hour, everything felt normal. The fields rolled by, sun breaking through thin clouds, radio humming. I even laughed at myself for losing sleep over a ghost story. Then, at mile marker 12, the air shifted. The temperature dropped inside the car, cold enough to fog the windshield. My breath came out in clouds. The steering wheel felt slick in my palms, though the heater was blasting. When I glanced at the passenger seat, my chest locked. He was back. The man in the flannel, hands folded in his lap, head bowed slightly, as if he'd never left at all. I jerked the wheel, swerved onto the shoulder. Gravel spat under the tires. My heart hammered, breath ragged. "What the hell?" He lifted his head slowly. His eyes caught the sunlight, flat and gray. "Thanks for the ride," he said, same calm, steady voice. I slammed my door open, stumbled out onto the asphalt. Cold air stung my face. When I turned back, the seat was empty. I laughed, shaky and wild. "Lack of sleep," I muttered. Just lack of sleep. But when I slid back in, something changed. The seatbelt on the passenger side was buckled. I stared at it, throat tight. My hand hovered, trembling, before I reached to pull it free. The latch wouldn't budge. I yanked harder. Nothing. It was locked tight, pulled across empty fabric. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." I shoved the car into drive, desperate to put distance between me and that marker. The highway blurred past, trees whipping by in green streaks. But when I glanced in the mirror, I froze. The back seat wasn't empty. He was there now, sitting directly behind me. His face leaned close to the glass, breath fogging the window. His lips moved slowly, deliberately. I couldn't hear the words, but I read them perfectly in the mirror. "You're next." My throat closed. I pressed the gas harder, but the car didn't respond. The engine whined, but the speedometer stayed frozen at 60. I slammed the pedal again, frantic. The numbers didn't move. Then, faintly through the static of the radio, his voice whispered, "Mile 12." I glanced at the roadside, and my stomach dropped. The same crooked sign stood there, mile marker 12, again. And standing just beyond it, pale and still, was another version of him, thumb out, waiting for me to stop. The second hitchhiker, the double, stood at the shoulder, thumb out, eyes fixed on me as I barreled toward him. The one in the back seat whispered through the radio static, voice layered and hollow, "Mile 12, mile 12. My chest seized. "No!" I shouted, wrenching the wheel. The Corolla skidded into the opposite lane, tires screeching. For a heartbeat, the figure on the shoulder blurred past in my headlights, then vanished. I snapped my head toward the back seat. Empty. The seatbelt still buckled tight across nothing. I pressed the pedal hard, desperate to break the loop. The trees thinned, giving way to farmland. The sun pierced through gray clouds. For a moment, relief loosened my chest. I'd made it out. But then the sign appeared again. Mile marker 12. My breath hitched, and standing there was the same man. Same flannel, same calm, steady posture. "No," I whispered. "This isn't real." I squeezed my eyes shut, counted to 3, opened them again. The road was still there. The marker was still there. And this time, he was standing in the middle of the lane, hand raised in greeting. I swerved, nearly putting the car into a ditch. My pulse pounded in my ears. I couldn't keep this up. If I kept looping, I'd crash, or my heart would give out first. The radio crackled again, his voice clearer now. "You saw me. That means you're carrying me." My throat closed. "What do you want from me?" Silence. Then softly, "To get home." I laughed, high and broken. "You're dead. You can't go home." The seatbelt buckle clicked, unlocking itself. My head whipped to the passenger seat, still empty. But the buckle lay loose now, as if he'd just stepped out. The air inside the car grew heavy, sharp with the metallic tang of blood. My chest heaved, stomach turning. "Mile 12, the voice whispered. And there it was again. The sign. The same crooked post. I snapped. I slammed the brakes, skidding to a stop right beside it. Gravel sprayed, the car shuddering. I threw the door open, staggered onto the shoulder. My knees nearly buckled. The road was silent, empty. But in the corner of my eye, I saw him, standing in the field beyond the marker, watching. "Enough!" I screamed. "Leave me alone!" The figure tilted his head, slowly raised his hand. Not in greeting this time, in warning. The sky darkened, the fields blurred into shadow. My stomach dropped as the whole world seemed to fold around me, road, sky, earth, collapsing into a single endless stretch of blacktop. And at its center, always, stood mile 12. I woke in my motel room. Morning sunlight filtered through the blinds. My car keys sat on the nightstand. My Corolla waited outside, spotless. For a moment, I convinced myself it had been a nightmare, a bad dream after a long drive, until I opened the glove compartment. Inside lay a mud-stained flannel shirt, folded neatly. It reeked of blood. I've been driving a cab for over 20 years, seen everything you can imagine, drunks who can't find their wallets, couples making out in the back seat, even a guy who tried to bring a goat into my car once. You do this long enough, nothing surprises you, or at least that's what I thought. It was a Thursday night, about 11 p.m. The streets were quiet, just a drizzle coming down, neon signs bleeding against wet asphalt. I was about ready to call it when the dispatcher buzzed me with one last fare. Pick up downtown, drop off near the river. Easy money. When I pulled up, he was already standing on the curb. Tall, lean, wearing a dark overcoat and hat pulled low. No bag, no umbrella, just waiting under the rain like he didn't feel it. He stepped into the back without a word, water dripping off his coat onto the floor mats. I adjusted the mirror, gave my usual line. Where to? His voice was low, almost too soft. Take me to the bridge. I nodded, pulled away from the curb. For a while, the only sounds were the wipers squeaking and the hum of the engine. I tried small talk, weather, sports, the usual, but he didn't answer. Just sat perfectly still, hands folded, staring straight ahead. Something about him put me on edge. Most fares fidget, check their phones, tap their legs, look out the window. He didn't move at all. If it weren't for the occasional blink, I might have thought he was a mannequin. I told myself he was just one of those quiet types. God knows I've had enough of them. But then I glanced at the rear view, and my chest went tight. He was staring right at me, not through the window, not at the road, at me. His head tilted slightly, eyes dark and unblinking, fixed on the mirror like he'd been waiting for me to look. I swallowed, turned back to the windshield. My hands tightened on the wheel. We'll be at the bridge in 10. No response. I checked the meter, focusing on the red digits ticking up. But every time my eyes drifted to the mirror, he was still staring. At the third red light, I couldn't take it anymore. I turned around in my seat. The back seat was empty. My blood ran cold. The floor mats were still wet, puddled from his coat. The seatbelt was still twisted, like someone had just sat there. But the passenger was gone. I spun back forward, heart pounding. And in the mirror, he was there again, sitting upright, staring at me. I slammed the brakes, the cab lurching to a halt in the middle of the road. My chest heaved, hands shaking. I twisted back again. Nothing. Empty seat. The horn blared behind me. I slammed the gas, tires squealing, forcing the cab forward. Just tired, I muttered. Just seeing things. 20 years of late nights and my brain's finally cracking. But the mirror didn't lie. Every glance showed him there. Not moving, not blinking, just waiting. And as I drove over the slick streets, the words formed in my head. Words I knew weren't mine. You'll never drop me off. My hands locked on the wheel, knuckles pale. I tried not to look at the mirror, but my eyes kept darting up against my will. Every time, he was there, sitting perfectly straight, rain dripping from his coat onto the seat. His eyes never blinked. You're not real, I whispered under my breath. You're stress, just stress. The cab's meter ticked higher, red digits glowing. 20 minutes had passed since I'd picked him up, but the bridge was nowhere in sight. That didn't make sense. I'd driven this route hundreds of times. The bridge should have appeared 10 minutes ago. Now the road stretched endlessly, slick black asphalt winding through rain and dark. My chest tightened. Where are we? I muttered. From the back, his voice came, low and steady. On the way. I nearly swerved. What did you say? On the way, he repeated. My throat went dry. I twisted around. The back seat was empty again, but in the mirror, he sat there. I snapped the radio on, anything to drown the silence. Static hissed, then a voice slipped through, low, monotone, chanting something I couldn't understand. Not English, not any language I knew. I killed the radio, heart hammering. The voice didn't stop. It was coming from the back seat. I slammed the brakes, skidding to a stop on the deserted road. The cab shook, wipers squealing against glass. I twisted in my seat, empty. Rain pounded the roof, a steady drumming. My chest heaved. I grabbed the door handle, ready to throw myself out and just run. But before I could pull it, the locks clicked down on their own, every door. My stomach dropped. In the mirror, his reflection leaned forward, though the seat itself stayed empty. His face pressed close, lips at my ear, though nothing was there. "You can't leave me," he whispered. I screamed, shoving at the locks, pounding the glass. The cab didn't budge. The air grew heavy, thick with damp earth and the coppery tang of blood. Then the headlights flickered. The road ahead shifted, warped. Buildings rose from the darkness, old and crumbling, their windows black and hollow. The asphalt narrowed, bending into cobblestones, slick with rain. My breath caught. I knew this wasn't my city anymore. The meter kept ticking, digits racing higher and higher, blurring red until they no longer looked like numbers. I gripped the wheel again, desperate to stay sane. "Fine," I shouted. "Where do you want to go?" His reflection smiled for the first time. "To the end." The cab jolted forward without me touching the gas. My body slammed back into the seat as the car roared down the narrow, twisting street. The rain blurred into sheets of gray, lanterns flickering in windows that hadn't burned in decades. I fought the wheel, tried to hit the brakes, but nothing responded. The cab drove itself, pulling me deeper. The mirror shook violently, glass rattling in its frame. His reflection leaned closer, closer, until his dark eyes filled the view entirely. "Almost there," he whispered. The glass spider-webbed with cracks. The mirror shattered. Fragments rained across the dash, glittering in the dim light. I jerked the wheel in panic, but the cab didn't swerve. It drove itself, humming steady, pulling me deeper into streets I didn't recognize. My breath came fast and shallow. I gripped the wheel, knuckles white, though it felt more like a prop than a tool. The rain outside blurred into streaks, and through them I glimpsed shapes, old buildings leaning inward, their windows filled with watching eyes. "You're almost there," the voice whispered. Not from the back seat anymore, from everywhere. The roof, the floor, inside my head. I forced myself to look at the seat behind me, empty. But I could feel him. His presence pressed in on my skin, damp and cold. The scent of rain-soaked wool and something older. Rotting leaves, iron. "What do you want from me?" I shouted, throat raw. The meter ticked faster, the numbers spinning into a blur of red. "I just want the ride to end," he said. Something in his voice made my stomach twist. Not anger, not malice, sadness. The cab turned sharply on its own, tires screeching against cobblestones. Ahead, the road narrowed into a tunnel of dripping brick. Lanterns swayed along its walls, each one reflecting in the windshield like a line of candles leading to an altar. I screamed, yanking the wheel. This time it responded, swerving wildly. The cab skidded sideways, slammed to a stop. My chest heaved. For a moment, silence. Then the passenger door clicked open. My blood froze. Slowly I turned my head. He was sitting there. Not a reflection. Not a trick. The man in the overcoat, hat low, rain dripping steadily from his brim. His face was pale, lined, eyes dark and heavy. "You've driven me far enough," he said softly. I scrambled for the door handle, ready to bolt, but my body locked in place. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. He leaned forward, closer, until his breath fogged the glass between us. "You don't remember, do you?" he whispered. "What?" My voice cracked. His hand reached into his coat. My pulse spiked. I thought he was pulling a weapon. Instead, he drew out a wallet. My wallet. I stared. My license photo stared back at me from the clear plastic sleeve. Same name, same face. But the expiration date had passed, 10 years ago. My vision blurred. "That's not... You picked me up before," he said. His voice was heavy, final. "But you never dropped me off." The tunnel ahead yawned wide, swallowing what little light remained. My cab rolled forward again, slowly this time, lanterns winking out one by one. I fought to scream, to move, to do anything, but all I could do was drive. and the last thing I saw before the dark closed in was the meter, frozen on a final fare. 0200. They found my cab 2 weeks later, abandoned near the bridge. The doors were locked, the keys still in the ignition. No sign of me inside, but every driver who's taken that cab since swears the same thing. When the rain hits just right, the rearview mirror shows a passenger in the back seat, hat low, overcoat dripping, and sometimes when the ride ends, the meter flashes a single message: fare unfinished. That's all for this episode, but the nightmares don't end here. Subscribe for daily horror stories, leave a like if you want more, and let me know in the comments where in the world you're watching from. I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you.